Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Mirror podcast. I'm your host, Kyle David, as always. Today, I'm super geeked for my guest. Turns out we're about 5-6 miles away from each other and didn't even know it. So anyways, look at God. God is good. What a small world. Today, I have author, speaker, marketing extraordinaire, just a guy who has his hands in a lot of things, and I think is doing some really impactful stuff. So with no further ado, Jon Seidl, ladies and gentlemen. I have Jon Seidl today. Jon, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Kyle, man, it is so good to be here. And I will say, this is so, I know we're going to talk about my book and everything. You are actually the first podcast I'm recording for the book. So like, you're the OG.
Let's go.
We haven't even started like all the media stuff yet, but I'll be flying to New York and doing a book tour and stuff, but you are getting the first.
Bro, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm honored, truly.
Yeah. Well, you reached out to me and I was like, absolutely. Let's talk about it.
I love it. I love it. This is a great connection. So let's just go right into it. Kind of give us like your origin story, your 5 to 7 minute, who you are, where you came from, and how you got to where you are.
Well, one night a man and a woman got together. I am originally from Wisconsin. And so I grew up there, was born and raised in Wisconsin, and found my way to a college in New York City where I met my wife. And so lived in New York City for about 7 years. And then the company I was working for moved their headquarters down to Dallas, and they needed a representative down there. And so I followed the company down there, and I was there for a little bit. It was in the news business. And so what it took me about 5 years to kind of get burned out. And so I left the news business and went to work for a nonprofit that I think a lot of people know called I Am Second. And so they do a lot of videos of life transformation and being real and being raw and being open. And that was really important for me because that's where I decided to tell the world my secret. And literally that was the name of the article where I first opened up about being diagnosed with anxiety and OCD. Sorry, you'll see I'm coming with a little bit of a cold that I'm just getting over. So
you're good.
Try not to blow everyone's eardrums out with with some coughing, but and so it was there where I told the world what I was dealing with, anxiety and OCD. I had just been diagnosed about a year earlier or so. And so we'll get back to that. But then from I'm Second, I went and worked for Kirk Cameron of
the infamous
and Fireproof, fame, and then worked on another digital media project, and then kind of during that time was working on this book, and now here we are. I've literally said the Lord kind of asked me to step out in faith and say, hey, I want you to like quit all your full-time work and go all in on spreading the message of this book. So right now I'm an independent contractor. I have my own company that I do consulting and for digital media marketing and content creation, but really it, I did all that to pave the way for like, Lord, whatever you want to do with this book, I think you're going to use it. And so I want to be free and available as much as possible, where I don't have to be like, hey, am I going to have to take vacation days for this? Or, so here I am. And so that's kind of the overview. I'm married to my wife, Brett, and we have 2 kids, Annie and Jack, who are 6 and 3. And like you said, live right down the road in the Dallas area.
Let's go.
Metroplex, as they call it. So that's kind of my origin story.
Okay, great. Yeah, like I said earlier, we could probably throw a rock at each other and hit you. So if something comes through your window, my bad.
Yeah, right. Well, it depends on how this interview goes, right?
Yeah, right. I could really take it south if that happens. So let's just dive into it, man. Like, again, you've said it, I've said it, finding rest, right? You wrote a book on anxiety and faith. It's not out yet, right? So when is the book coming out? So we kind of have a preview.
Yeah, so we're in the pre-order phase,
right?
And the book officially drops on September 28th, which someone was like, man, September 28th. And I'm like, you guys don't realize how close September 28th is, you know? I know there's a lot that I have to do leading up to the release. And so, but you can pre-order it now. And if you pre-order, you know, especially through Amazon, you lock in the price. Like if it ever fluctuates, you get the lowest price. And so, you know, and really, man, I'm telling you, like, I've been blown away, like even just in pre-orders. And I don't say this to trumpet myself.
Sure.
I say it like how good God is. But it became a #1 bestseller in several categories,
That's insane.
number 17 new release in all of Amazon, the number 110 book in all of Amazon. And I'm like, holy cow.
That's wild.
And it just speaks like, this is why I wrote the book, right? Because here's the funny thing. This is how God works. Like when I signed the book contract, it was in December, I believe, December of 2019, right? So before, you know, when people are like, oh, there's some people that are getting these colds over in China that seem to be a little bit more than just a cold, you know? And, you know, little did I know that the pandemic would hit in people who have never experienced anxiety, or anxiety that's been laying dormant for so long would now surface and come out. And now anxiety is like the #1 topic in the country when it comes to health and mental health and what people are struggling with. It's crazy what how much it's blown up. And so now here's a resource that hopefully will be able to talk to people about what they're going through, how faith is integral in that, and also just how the church hasn't done a good job, because I think there's a lot of people who are going through this that are like, yeah, but you know, I did have this before the pandemic and my church doesn't know how to deal with it. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, they don't. You know. So so that's that's kind of the awesome part about how this book was birthed is before the pandemic, and now it's going to hit at just the right time, I think.
That's some wild timing, man. Again, look at God. Like it's just so funny that you say that. That's very interesting, first of all, because it's so funny. Even in my own life, God was doing things in me before the pandemic that was preparing me for that season and this time. And it sounds like the book was the same, is that you didn't even know what was coming, right? But you were being faithful and doing right what you felt God was calling you to do, not knowing there was you probably knew there was a great purpose for that, but now even knowing it's a massive purpose now with the timing of the book release and where we are in the world, right? So kudos to you for just being faithful, man. I think that's powerful. I just wanted to ask you some questions, like what obviously it's something that is coming from your heart, right? Something you said you've dealt with, so it's not like you're writing from a third person point of view, right? This is something that's close to home. What are like some of the experiences, whether it's anxiety or your faith or the church, kind of that inspired you to go, man, I need to write this book?
Yeah, great question. So I would say I'll start out with two things. One is I knew kind of growing up that something was different about me. I couldn't really put my finger on it. You know, even in the book, I say, like, you know, I grew up in a Christian home, and the phrase is like, you know, act in such a way that like everyone will like see you and want to be like you, and you can point to Jesus. And I'm looking at myself being like, why would anyone want to be like me? Like, I'm a wreck, you know, like I had thoughts that I couldn't get out of my head. I would get fixated on things that just would not go away. You know, I'd have these internal like feelings where I feel like I'm on an emotional roller coaster and my heart is beating out of my chest. And and it kind of all came to a head. I say like, I'm not really sure how I got through high school or college. I'm really not. Like, I mean, it's by the grace of God, right? But I got married, and around that 2014 time, there was just something that happened with my wife and I. It's like, I mean, if you have anxiety or OCD, like you're going to be able to relate to this, but for those who don't, like, it seems silly, and it is silly, right? Like, my wife and I are about to go on a walk. We went to a coffee shop. I went to the bathroom. I hate Splenda. I think it tastes like sock water. It makes everything taste like sock water. And I told my wife, I said, hey, just make sure that they don't put Splenda in my coffee. And I'm like, I'm gonna run to the bathroom. Came back, taste my coffee, and it's like it's got Splenda in it. And I freak out. Not like, freak out like I'm screaming and gonna punch a wall, but like I'm like, why would you do, like, I told you one thing, like, and I just couldn't stop thinking about the wrong sweetener in my coffee, and it ruined my entire day. We didn't go on a walk. We went back to our apartment. We didn't talk, and my wife the next day, I'm looking at this like woman in front of me who's just like beat down and broken, and she's like, Jon, that's not normal. And by the way, like that's just like one example of throughout our marriage where like little things, if they don't go how you expect or want, or if I mess up, or if something happens, like it ruins not just the entire day, but the entire weekend. That you got to get help. And, it was hurt, like seeing how broken down she was. I was like, yeah, you're right. I do need to get help. And so I called my sister because I knew that she had kind of some of the same reactions to things. And she's like, oh, yeah, you have anxiety and OCD. It like runs in the family. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah. And she starts naming off like these people in my family tree and like their behaviors. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so like the next day, I find a psychiatrist, I book an appointment, and it takes a little bit to get in, but like 2 weeks later I go in and he's like, I tell him everything. And he's like, oh yeah, you're like a classic case of GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And it was one of the most freeing moments of my life. I think there's a lot of people, like, they may get a medical diagnosis and it might be like the worst day of their life. For me, it was like one of the best days in my life. And so what I talk about in the book is that the reason is you can't fight something that you can't name, or that you don't, or that some people won't name, right? They're afraid to name it. And so by knowing what was going on inside of me, knowing what was wrong with me, I was like, finally, now I can address it. If you don't know what your enemy is and can't see your enemy, you can't fight them,
Sure.
And so I knew that there was a lot of people like me who have been suffering in silence, or maybe even just recently put a name to what was going on, and they felt lost and hopeless, because I did at the time too. I mean, well, that was a great moment for me. It was kind of like, okay, now what? All right, now I know what I'm battling, but what does that battle look like?
Sure.
And so that was one of the big reasons I wanted to write the book. I wanted to help people like me who needed to face this and didn't know how, right? I think the second reason is I grew up in a faith tradition that just didn't treat mental health well. And the more that I talked about what was going on inside of me, especially during that I Am Second article, you just would not believe the comments and the emails and the messages that I got that were like, yeah, I've been suffering for way too long, and the church has not helped me at all. They've told me it was a sin issue in my life that was causing this. They told me, hey, you just need to, like, they'd throw a verse at me and say, just think about that and, have more faith. Right. Or just pray more, and that's, I remember when this was a few years back, I kind of wrote something about that on Twitter, and someone responded to me and they're like, they couldn't believe, they're like, does the church still do people in the church still think that way? And like the next day, you know, there was a tweet from someone that I was able to like screen cap and say, yeah, look, like exactly, you know.
Sure.
And so I think some people are like, no, there's no way that the church still, and the church, like, I don't want to lump the entire church,
Sure.
but I do think there's a lot of the church that hasn't addressed this well.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you're part of a church, you're watching this and you're like, well, my church does it well. They're not like that. Great. Like, awesome. Praise God. Right. But I
Right.
think there's a lot of people that I know and have had contact with that church hasn't done a good job. And so, like I said, the second reason for the book is to say, this is how your faith can speak to your mental health issues. For me, it's anxiety and OCD. For others, it might be depression or bipolar. And so while anxiety and OCD, and by the way, you know, OCD is a subset of anxiety, right? So I really just kind of generally talk about anxiety, though mention OCD. But if you have OCD, you have anxiety. It's kind of that way, but not necessarily everyone who has anxiety has OCD. But anyway, so I just kind of lump it all in with anxiety, but really it's meant to, if you have anxiety, if you have depression, which I went through, this book is meant to help you have a proper understanding of the theology of suffering as well. So that's a big point for me. And so, you know, understanding why we go through the crap that we go through and not falling into kind of this false gospel of like, if you pray hard enough, if you're, you know, God just wants you to be, have a happy life. And it's like, no, that's not true. Like, that's not in the Bible, you know,
Right.
like Jesus says you will have suffering. Well, that doesn't sound that happy to me. Right. Like, so why? Like, why do I have anxiety? Why do I have to go through that? And so there's even just an entire chapter of how I kind of came to understand that through the book of Job. The third thing is, and maybe it's kind of a 2A, is I talked about growing up in a faith tradition that didn't really handle mental health well. And that included like looking down on you if you took medication. And so one of the big themes as well to the book is saying, you know, this is like, medication is okay. You can take medication for your mental health. It doesn't mean that you have a lack of faith. It doesn't mean that you're not trusting God, and kind of going through the idea of that, like, medication is a common grace, just like the sun, just like the rain, just like food, the ability to taste good food. Like, these are things that God has given to us, and refusing to go to the doctor for a broken brain is about as stupid as refusing to go to the doctor for a broken wrist. If you look down at your wrist and it's like off to the side, you're like, I'm just going to have faith. You know, it's like, no, you need to go get an x-ray and get a cast, buddy. You know, like, just get a cast and let the doctor help you. And that's kind of how I have come to view medication. And so then the third thing, you know, what I would say is why I wrote this book is for people like my wife. And so my wife, who's a saint, there, you know, being a loved one, a family member, a friend of someone who's struggling with mental health and anxiety it can also be just as lonely of a place as the person going through it. And I wanted to write, it's first of all intended as a guide for those who have anxiety, right?
Sure.
But it's also intended as a lifeline for people who are trying to love those who have mental health issues.
So
because
good.
my wife went through a lot, you know, and I didn't even realize what she was going through until, you know, I say that, like, me taking medication, if my anxiety has an 8, it brings me down to a 4, and then I can like see clearer and I can address like all those other issues that are going on. And so, like, once I started getting on medication, was able to kind of see everything, I was like, oh my God, she's been putting up with so much, you know? And so it's meant to help those people understand us as the sufferer better, and then give them resources and ways on how to help us. And I guess finally you could say it's also a resource for the church, how the church has done this not well. And so here's ways that the church can do and be better. So I guess you could kind of put those 4 things, 5 if there's 2B, but those are the reasons that I wrote this book and who it appeals to.
That's so good, man. That hits home for me personally, as somebody who has dealt with anxiety for a long time and been on medication for a little over a decade. And that really hits home for me, man, just personally. Like, I love that you said that, because I've struggled in my own life of going, do I trust God because I'm taking these meds? Like, that's wild that we've connected just on a personal level, because I literally, even the other day, I was going, do I need to go to my psychiatrist and say, hey, I need a plan to get off these because my faith. So it's like, you're speaking right to me, man. Like, you're speaking right to me. And I know I'm not the only one. I know there's people watching and listening that are in the same place, because, again, unfortunately, I haven't heard the church speak a lot to it either. And so I have been in this place of like, am I not trusting? Like, do I need to get off meds and fully just trust God to take care of it? Right. Like, and so that's encouraging to hear. Now I'm super excited for the book, actually.
Yeah. And here's what I would say, especially to that, like,
please,
when that thinking, and I don't say this in a judgmental way, but actually that thinking is putting God in a box. You, not just you, but the general you, and we, when we say, you know what, maybe my faith isn't strong enough, let me get off and see. It's like, we're telling God, you can only help us in X, Y, and Z. Like, it's actually kind of a pride issue. We're saying like, no, God, you can help me in any way but medication. Like, and so I tell this story, and it's kind of like this modern proverb, and I love it. And so it goes like this. It's like, let's just say they're in Houston, right? We're in Texas. There's a lot of flooding and hurricanes that happen in Houston. So there's this guy, and he says, like, it starts flooding and the waters are like getting really high. And he prays to God. He says, Lord Jesus, please help me. Like, I'm believing that you're going to help me. Please do it. You know, you're going to come through. And like, the National Guard pulls up in a truck and they say, hey buddy, hop in, let's go. We're here to rescue you. And he says, no. I'm praying for God to save me. Just he's going to save me. And so they drive off, and like, the flood keeps happening. He climbs up into his roof, and like, a boat comes, and he's like, Lord, please save me. And a boat comes, and the boat says, hey, like, hop in, we're here to save you. He's like, no. I'm waiting for God to save me. Like, just, I know he's going to come through. And so they drive off, and like, finally it's like, I mean, he's on just like the peak of his roof. And he says, Lord, please, I know you can save me. Please save me. And a helicopter comes and drops a line down and says, like, come on, get on the helicopter. And he's like, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. And the helicopter goes away, and the guy dies and gets up to heaven. He's like, Lord, I don't understand. Like, I was praying for you to save me. Why didn't you save me? And the Lord's like, I sent you a truck, a boat, and a helicopter. What about those wasn't good enough? And so like, that's how I feel like medication, right? Like, Lord, I want to have enough faith, like help me. And the Lord's like, I've created this common grace, this thing that I've made available to everyone. Like, take it. Like, I'm giving you a lifeline, right? And like, that's not just say like, does the Lord miraculously heal people? Like, absolutely. And I've heard those stories, and I'm like, I pray that that's me. I pray that one day the Lord would just miraculously heal me, and everything, like, I wouldn't need to take medication. But so far, he hasn't. Right. And so then, when I talk about this proper theology of suffering, if you look in Paul's writings, he talks about this so much, is that, okay, he hasn't taken away the thorn, right? My anxiety. So that means he is allowing it to refine me, to redefine me, to show me things, to push me closer to him. And so I have to rest in that, finding rest. Like, that's part of finding rest. Finding rest is not just the absence of all of my troubles. Finding rest is learning to trust the Lord that he is using them for my good and to bring glory to him. And so I've to just say, all right, Lord, like, you haven't taken it away. There's still something you want me to learn through this. And I have to press on through that.
Mm. That's so good, man. Thank you for saying that. Like that, just again, on a personal level, that really is encouraging. Like, man, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And
Yeah,
it's interesting because I'm big on learning through the struggles, right? Like I recently had a surgery, I've had a stomach infection, I've been dealing with physical ailments, and I'm like, Lord, teach me. I'm just gonna press through. But with the mental thing, for some reason, it's different, right?
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Huh.
that's like I don't pretend like I'm not a psychologist, right?
Sure.
Like, but one of the things that I say in the book that I think I mean, there's a few things I think that have led to that mentality. One of them is like when it comes to mental health, we kind of treat it as like a pull it up from the bootstraps for whatever reason. We just do. And that's wrong, right? Like, it's like the one thing that like you can't pull up from your bootstraps, right? Like you can be like, I'm going to have a better work ethic. Yeah, great. But you can't be like, I'm going to have a better mental health ethic. Like,
right.
No, like,
right.
Like
What does that look like?
Yeah, exactly. And I think two other things I would be like, people don't fully treat it as the medical issue that it is, right? Like for whatever reason, we haven't fully adopted that. It's like, no, like there are synapses that are off in my brain. There's levels in my brain that aren't right, and so I need medication to help me with that. Like it's very plain, And then I think there's also kind of like, when you think of like this, like I said, like this false, like kind of like prosperity gospel type thing that says, if I believe X, Y, and Z and treat God like a vending machine, and if I do X, Y, and Z, he's going to give me A, B, C back, And it's like, no, that's not how God works. He's not a genie. He's not a vending machine. Right. And so trusting in him is saying, all right, Lord, this is my thorn, and what you want me to learn from it, I'm going to learn from it.
And it sounds like in your situation, especially, like it's almost as if the curse becomes the blessing in a way.
Absolutely.
Right.
I said this, I was recording some videos the other day, and I said, listen, I've learned to thank God for my anxiety. There's a great quote, and it's kind of been a game of telephone since it was said, but it's attributed to this great preacher named Charles Spurgeon, who's like nicknamed the Prince of Preachers, by the way. So like, he's like the dude, right? By the way, he struggled with depression and wrote about it in his writings that he struggled with depression, right? So the Prince,
I didn't know that.
Struggling with depression. And so there's this quote that's attributed to him, and it goes something like this. I have learned to kiss the waves that throw me against the rock of ages. I have learned to kiss the waves that throw me against the rock of ages. The idea is like, I have learned to be thankful for those struggles, those waves in my life that actually throw me and push me towards Christ. I can tell you, Kyle, that without my anxiety, my faith would not be as strong as it is. I would not be where I am in my relationship to the Lord. And so, yeah, I do thank him for those waves. I do thank him for my anxiety. And like, I don't say that to be trite. Like, listen, I know there are people into this. There's like, I'm drowning right now. There's no way I'm going to be thanking him for the wave. And I would say, I totally get it. Right. But it's a process. So the first thing you need to do is you need to accept that lifeline, whatever that is. If it's medication, if it's going to a counselor, if it's going to a doctor, a psychiatrist, whatever it is, like, yeah, you're right. You are drowning. So take the lifeline first, right? And then as that lifeline brings you closer to shore, like it is a process. I don't pretend that everyone that reads this book or that's listening to this is going to be exactly where I am today. But, take the next step, take that first step.
That's so good. I love the lifeline analogy, because as I think about it, I'm like, we will take a medication for anything, any other ailment, right? Any physical ailment. But then there's the taboo of the mental health medicines, right? Anything that's, that's going to deal with depression or anxiety, all of a sudden that's in a different category than if I have chronic headaches or I have chronic leg pain or, I have whatever. right?
You have an infection, an antibiotic.
And that's accepted by everybody.
Yeah.
But we're still stigmatizing the mental health thing. So I'm glad that you're talking about it, man. I haven't experienced, and maybe I've done a poor job of seeking out materials to really speak to it. But I think this is maybe God put me on this path just specifically for this. So,
and that's the only reason we're having this conversation. Like, I'm okay with that,
bro,
seriously.
that's so good. That's so good. I'm excited for this. So I kind of want to move on into the next thing. Cause again, like I said at the beginning, you have your hands in a couple of different things. And so again, yesterday I dove into, and some people that follow me on Instagram messaged me about this. What is this thing? The Tome app, right?
Yeah.
Tell us, what is the Tome app? And I've dove into it a little bit so I kind of understand, but want to hear from you. What is the Tome app? What is the purpose of it? What are we doing there? What's the vision for this?
Yeah, so this is something that was started by some friends of mine that they asked me to kind of come in and help them with my digital media and writing background. And so kind of came in very early on, and I'm telling you, like, it's going to revolutionize how people engage with the Bible. And so the idea is that, like, there's a lot of people, especially in the pandemic, who are like, they're chunking the deuce on church and the Lord. And they're like, man, when I look for Christian content that is relevant to me and like isn't done in a corny, cheesy way, I can't find it. And so the idea is with Tome, which you go to tomeapp.com, you will see that it is unexpected speakers telling unexpected stories, and in the format of like 5 to 7 minute daily devotionals. And like devotionals can kind of be like it's got a bad
trigger word.
Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to like destigmatize that word to say like, no, this is for people who are busy, who are on the go, who are just tired and upset. And it's like 5 minutes a day, and you're going to get a highly produced video. Like the cameras we use to film these videos are like what they use to film Avengers, like we are not, skimping here like a lot of other Christian organizations do. And so we are giving it to you in a personalized app experience that will allow you to just really like be sucked in a good way. And so there's going to be we have athletes and celebrities and influencers and faith leaders, like everyone you can think of is going to be in there, and a lot of them already are. And I'm even in there. I was talking about filming. Like I filmed my we call them tomes, which are the daily devotionals. I filmed my tomes on anxiety on Friday, and so you'll be able to get just a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here in kind of that quick hit format. And so I'm telling you, like, you should go see the trailer is incredible. And it's, when we say we're doing stuff in a unexpected way, I think, especially if you've been around the faith community, it will feel that way. And we're excited about where it's going to go.
I'm excited too. Like I said, I downloaded it yesterday, and the first video I watched, interestingly enough, so I'm not from here. I'm actually from Colorado. And the first video, the first guy that spoke was the Denver Nuggets basketball announcer.
Yep.
So even that small connection, I went, man, God is just good. And the guy was so vulnerable. Like,
yeah.
And I think and I'm sure you agree, there's so much power in vulnerability. Like what you're doing with the book, your tome that's going to come out on anxiety, this guy's tome on confession, like the vulnerability, I think, is what will draw people in also, the production quality. But the vulnerability is what gets people, that, bro. When you are willing to go, hey, look, I may be a pastor, a Christian, and you may think I'm just painting this perfect picture, but I'm broken. And let me tell you about it. And that hit me. And that's when that hit me. So that's the thing I took away the most from Tome, is this is about to connect with people on a deep level, because the level of vulnerability, it's not something we really, again, not to lump the whole church into it, but I don't think we always prioritize vulnerability from our leaders, right? They're on this pedestal, and they're perfect, and we just want to be like them. versus sometimes be like Christ. In my own experience, sometimes we want to be like the pastor more than we want to be like Jesus, because we think he's got it all together.
Yep.
So to be able to hear from people that are in the faith and that are successful people that are going to go, I'm broken, and let me tell you about it, I think it's going to revolutionize things. So
yeah, I'm glad you hit that.
Go for it.
Like that is important, right? I think, like I've heard from people that, man, I don't want church because the church is full of hypocrites. And I'm like, that's exactly where they need to be. Like, yeah, the church is filled with hypocrites. You're darn right it is. Like, the difference is we realize that, like, we realize our legs are broken and we need a doctor, right? Like, we're not pretending that our legs aren't broken. So, are you going to see hypocrites in the church? Absolutely. And you should, because that's where they need to be. Right. And so, the people that are talking in the Tome app are like, listen, I'm broken. Like, we got one guy, it's like, I had a whole plan. This is how I was going to end it, and like, this is how the Lord entered into that moment. And it's like, dang, it hits you.
So a question about Tome, like, what does Tome mean? Is there a meaning behind the word?
So tome is kind of this old word. Tome means it's like an ancient scholarly work, or like a work that's divided into volumes, right? So like,
okay.
The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky is like, it's like a tome, right? Or tome, sometimes it's pronounced that way. It's like my tome. It's like my magnum opus, right?
Okay.
So the idea is that, like, I mean, that's kind of like the Bible, right? Like, the Bible's a tome, right? It's this scholarly, it's this old book. It's a series of volumes, right? 66 books. But then what we like to do, and what was awesome for us, is the Bible was written to me, right? And so if you split tome, it's to me. And so we want to personalize through that vulnerability the words of the Bible to really make it alive and say, oh, this was meant for me.
That's so good, man.
Yeah.
God, what you're doing is so good. I'm so geeked. I know that you kind of talked about this, but again, talking about, right, people coming out of COVID, the world's flipped upside down. We've probably never seen so much anxiety, depression, mental health struggles. Like you said earlier, people that have never dealt with mental health are now struggling and going, I don't know what to do. Where do I go? What would you say to somebody right now that's, maybe been quarantined or been alone throughout this season and developed something, or it's heightened what they already were experiencing? What do you say to the lonely person, the person that feels lost, hopeless, depressed, anxious, maybe a believer, may not be, but is just like, I don't know what to do? What do you say to that person?
So first of all, I would say you're not alone. There's a lot of people feeling that way. and one thing I make clear in the book is, like, I'm not, like, I am you. I am that person. Like, I don't talk about me necessarily like in the past tense of that. And so what I mean is, like, I still struggle at times with those thoughts and those feelings. Like, you're not alone, right? And so the second thing I would say is, like, there is hope. Like, it's not you are not destined to be feeling that way forever. There is help and there is hope. And like I said, that's why I wrote the book, right? To kind of like show you the help and the hope that is available. So like, it's not like, and the third thing is go read my book. Like, my point is to say, like, not read my book, but like, find the truths, like the truths that are in there are what is going to bring you out of that despair to find rest. And I said it earlier, it's like, finding rest does not mean an absence of everything that you're struggling with. And so I don't mean that to discourage people. I mean that to encourage them, to say, like, if you, like, my sister was a drug addict for a long time. And one of the reasons that she kept falling back into the addiction was because she made the mistake of thinking that the absence of the drug in her life was the answer. But that's a very lonely and a very short-sighted goal. The absence of the anxiety in your life is not the goal. The goal is, what can I chase after that's better than that, that replaces that gives meaning to that? Like, that's the goal. And so what I would say to that person is like, there's a deeper and bigger meaning for you out there than living like this. And so on one hand, like, you may live with it for the rest of your life. And then on the other hand, it's like, but living with it with a purpose, living it with an understanding is so much better, and it's available to you.
That's so good. That's so good. I can connect with that personally, because it's so interesting, the connections that are being made here. I struggled with addiction for my entire 20s. I ended up in a rehab facility because I thought, and don't get me wrong, rehab really was helpful for me, but sure, I still, getting out of rehab, still thought that not having the substances was the answer, right? I was like, as long as I can get clean, life will be better. Then that's what I'm looking for, is just not drinking and drugging. That's all I need. And it wasn't. God, over the next 2 years, really had to back me into a corner and take more from me and go, that's not it. Just not having the thorn in the side, as you say, is not, you haven't arrived there. What's your purpose, Kyle?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's what you're saying. That's so good, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. The goal is never not, for my sister, it was crack. If the goal in your life is just not crack, you're going to be constantly falling back into it, because you need to be chasing after something greater and more.
That's so good. Yeah. There's no purpose in just not this, right? If I could just get rid of a bad thing, but there's no purpose post that.
Right. That if that's all it is, it's never going to be enough.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you a few closing questions, because I know you're a busy man. Okay, I'll ask that one later. So I wanted a little bit more lighthearted. I like to ask this to everybody.
Love
and
it.
It's getting more interesting as it's a very simple question. We're all caffeine addicts in this country, right? A bunch of caffeine addicts, right? You even mentioned coffee earlier. So you have 3 options: coffee, energy drinks, or tea. What's your go-to?
Coffee.
Okay. How do you like your coffee?
So I used to, when I lived in New York City, I used to drink it because the street vendor coffee was awful. I mean,
oh, really?
So you'd have to put like tons of cream and sugar in it. Then I left New York City, and I'm like, oh, all black coffee isn't this bad. So I was on black coffee for a long time. And then I think my wife started getting this really good, flavored creamer. And so now I'm back to I like it. I don't drink it black as much as I used to. I like it light, blonde, sweet, like my wife.
Shout out to, what's her name? Brett, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Shout out to your wife, Brett. Okay, so we got that one out of the way. So that's kind
of. But I will say this: you didn't give me the option of soda is actually my go-to. Oh, so I'm a big Coke Zero guy, but I also my wife got me this because I was drinking so many carbonated beverages. My wife got me a Sodastream for Christmas.
What is the Sodastream?
So Sodastream is, you fill this up with water, and it's you carbonate the water yourself. It's got this little handle you push down, and it carbonates the water for you. So now I drink about 5 of these a day. And I put little flavorings in them that you get at the grocery store. So now that's my go-to. My go-to is making my own carbonated drink. And I can choose ones that have caffeine in them or not. So I've actually lowered my caffeine intake because I was drinking way too much, which I talk about in the book, being cognizant of your caffeine intake. Let me pause.
Yeah.
Your anxiety is a physical and a spiritual issue. That's one of the biggest things of the book. And they are you can't just treat one of them. And for me, I can't treat the spiritual until I treat the physical. Medication is helpful for the physical. But one of the things is understanding like, oh, like if I'm drinking like 10 Coke Zeros a day, like that's actually not good for my anxiety.
Hmm.
Oh, maybe I should stop drinking caffeine like after 3 o'clock.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. You know, so like, so that's part of the reason this Sodastream has been so helpful, because I'll use the caffeine ones in the morning, afternoon. I will not, and I will sleep a ton better.
That's now that's an even deeper, interesting perspective of like what are we doing physically that's adding to the already underlying
Absolutely.
anxiety?
Listen, there's a whole chapter in the book called The Physical Battle, and where I talk about the physical things we need to not do and the physical things we need to do that will help us address our anxiety.
So good. So good, bro. Okay, so let's wrap it up. You said the book drops September 28th?
Yeah, but go pre-order now for two
Right.
reasons. One, you lock in the price. And two, like if you believe, like if you've heard what I've said and think this will help you, if you think it will help other people, you know, this is like my first book, right? Like I'm not a big name in the author world. And so like pre-orders really help. Like the more pre-orders you get, it's not for me, but like that will help other people see it because it rises on the charts. Like other, you know, bookstores take notice, like what's this book on anxiety that's like number, you know, whatever. And so then they're like, oh, people are interested. I'm going to order this book. And so like that's why pre-orders are important, because they're a signal to everyone else that like people want to talk about this. People want to address this topic, and this book is going to help them do it. So I know you'll have to wait like a little bit to get it, but also if you pre-order, like you guarantee that like you're going to be like one of the first people to get it. And so like if you know, you can go to my website, just go to findrestnow.com, findrestnow.com. And that takes you to a page on my website where people can pre-order. And I'm giving you the Amazon link because, you know, Amazon does stuff with distribution centers. So the more people in your area across the country that pre-order this, Amazon's like, oh, we got to stock this in one of our regional distribution centers. So that's why pre-orders are helpful and important.
Go pre-order the book. I'm going to go pre-order after this. And I think what you said is right. You know, it's not and I can tell your heart, man, it's not to make yourself money and to sell a lot of books. It's to spread a message and to really, you know, be able to help people. So if you guys are listening and this sounds practical to you, go help spread the message by pre-ordering it. Don't do it for money wise, do it to help spread the message. Right.
Absolutely.
100%. Jon, thanks so much, man. This has been, for me, selfishly, it's just been super encouraging and fun to talk to you. And I know it's going to be impactful. I really do. I believe it 100%.
I've really enjoyed it. And, you know, I think it's always great, like talking to someone who has been and is in the battle. So I appreciate you being open and vulnerable. And, you know, hopefully this has helped with your struggle and to see how God is using it and what he's kind of calling us to do as people who are in the fight.
Appreciate your time, man. Go pre-order the book, Finding Rest. It's going to be out September 28th. Go find it on Amazon. Go to, what was the website?
Findrestnow.com.
Findrestnow.com. Where can they find you online?
JonSeidl.com. Or if you go to that findrestnow.com, it's a page on my website. You'll be able to see all of my social media stuff and more about me. And you know, if you're someone who's listening to this and like want me to come talk, like, let's do it. Like, I just want to spread the word about this topic.
Let's go, man. Let's go. Well, thanks, Jon. Appreciate you, man. Let's hope that let's pray that this book is as impactful as it sounds like it is impactful to me. And as much as it is important to you, I hope that the message spreads wide and far.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Jon. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
Later.